Good evening. So, when I started special effects, I was mainly looking at stuff from YouTube, from stuff from Instagram, where people use stuff like latex, cotton, and you know. And then deciding that I wanted it to be my future career choice, I decided that I might actually need to do a few courses. So off I went on my merry little way with my bag filled with spirit gum and latex and a cream makeup, I think. And that was about it. Maybe a paintbrush as well, but I digress. Oh, what a surprise it was for my little brain to find out that the special effects industry does not actually utilise many of these products in day-to-day life when you're working on a set. And consequently, in the other courses I completed after this, it seemed to be that that was entirely correct. And sorry, the industry in fact then uses different techniques as commonly shown with social media. Who would have known? Not me. Yeah. And so it turns out that the most common, if not favourite material used in special effects today was one I had barely heard of and had no idea how to use. And so I bring you this, a crash course into silicone and its uses, or as I would like to call it, I got into debt to learn this information so you didn't have to. Yeah. And so we jump straight in, as this room is in fact around 1,000 degrees, and I am indeed dying at this very moment. Let's start. I'd also like to mention that I've had this chalkboard for about 6 years, and this is probably the first proper use I've had for it, so, you know, just thinking ahead. Yeah, I was. Right, yeah, also quick interjection, not silicone, you know, periodic tape the table one. No, this one's got an E, so it's different. I can't tell you the difference because I have no idea, but I just, yeah, no, I got them confused a lot. Who says I'm not helpful? What on earth is silicone, one might ask? If you are in fact looking for an actual scientific answer, I can't give you one. I actually have no idea. I just know it is something that you can mix and make stuff happen with. Yeah, I have no idea where it comes from, so. Silicone was widely made popular by makeup artist Gordon Smith in the 1990s. I did touch upon this subject when I mentioned it in my History of Special Effects video, which you should definitely check out because it is very, very good. This isn't to say people hadn't been experimenting necessarily with it before, but this was the real main breakthrough.
Need a pointy stick.
Silicone can in fact be usually divided into two separate ones, including tin silicone and platinum silicone. My pointer is a bow for a violin because I had nothing else to hand and it seemed long and pointy, so. There are numerous differences between these two silicones, many of which are scientific and complex in their nature. And these are answers that I do not have or provide because I don't know them. You can Google them. As I do not know the many scientific explanations you may be seeking in this video, it really boils down to two major factors. Platinum you can use for special effects, but is generally more expensive. Tin, no SFX. Well, basically what I was taught was that if you put on just tin silicone onto your direct skin, your skin will leach the tin out of the product and probably poison you, so. Also, I've never personally used it, I just know about it. And as with many a thing, it is usually the cheaper option, as special effects does like to in fact leach from your wallet. Constantly. It's an expensive hobby, just a heads up, so you know, it's expensive, your wallet will be crying. You can usually identify your platinum silicone by helpfully saying PlatSil, meaning it's just short for platinum silicone. Now we have acquired our silicone, you can see that they come in two parts, A and B. You cannot have one without the other, it will never ever set. Basically what happens is that you have two parts of silicone, you combine them together and it starts a magical scientific chemical reaction which then leaves you with your set product. Without it, your silicone will basically render useless forevermore. Ugh, it's gooey. As for what unset or uncured silicone looks like, it's... yeah. Oh god, I'm getting it everywhere. Oh. And you may ask, why do you have a glove covering that? And I do not have this answer for you, but it's really sticky now, oh god. Also, notable advantage of silicone is that when you keep your two containers unmixed forevermore, nothing's gonna happen to them, they're still gonna be usable like years later. I've had this for over 2 years and it is still completely usable. Silicone in fact comes clear, as you can see here. Oh god, that was more than I bought too. But I could have just shown this. Well, now you've seen two versions, but we'll get to the pigmented one later. Also, this setup of having an A and a B to mix together to make your thing set may seem very familiar to those who know about another different product. I'm of course referring to Sculpt Gel, which is usually the beginner's foray into... It's what you start off with when you have a silicone product, where you have A, B, but ooh, a mysterious C. What is in fact the third part of this mysterious C part? Well, before we head on to that, we probably need to quickly cover something called the Shaw scale. Named after a guy called Shaw, you could probably guess that. Anyway, so what in fact is this mysterious Shaw scale, you may in fact ask? Well, in a pretty basic term, which is of course the only term I know to talk about this, it was a scale derived by someone called Shaw to determine how soft something is. I promise this is relevant. For special effects knowledge, you should only really need to know about 3 different terms: 00, 10, 25. And really all it means is that the lower the number, the softer it is, the higher the number, the harder it is. Cool. We're all going to use them just relative to each other. As you can see on my handy little one, it has 10. So PlatSil, platinum silicon, 10 on the Shaw scale. All this really means is that if you mix together silicon, which are both 25 on the Shaw scale, your end result will be harder than if you mix together 2, which are 00. So why would I seemingly out of nowhere bring up this scale which measures how soft something is? Well, remember with our Sculpt Gel, we had the A and the B that the bigger silicone bottles had, but there was a mysterious third part, which was C. This part, the C, is known as a softener, or if you're mixing the bigger bottles together, it is known as Deadener. I don't know why it's called that either, it just is. Never felt more like a teacher in my life. Adding the softener or Deadener into the equation leaves us with something looking a bit like this. But why, pray you may ask, do we need to use softener when we use something? And here I shall bring up some physical examples. In special effects, the main uses for silicone can typically be divided into 2 different parts: molds and prosthetic pieces. In true Blue Peter fashion, this is one I made earlier. You can see it's pretty hard. As I press into it, you can see it's not really making much of a dent. This one also doesn't stretch very much. Molds end up needing to be quite hard so that they can hold their shape while you pour stuff into it. Prosthetic appliances, on the other hand, are used to mimic skin, which is generally a lot squishier than rubber. And so you add softener to get a different result. This one again is coloured differently, it's just a flesh tone. But getting a bit closer, you can see that this one squishes and stretches a lot easier. But now we've seen its effects, how do we know how much to use? With a silicone base of A and B mixed together, you need to use equal parts. If you use proportions that are simply unbalanced, it just won't set properly and it will still end up being sludgy and sticky and pretty much unusable. With C, however, depends on the use. If you want something to be a bit more harder and a bit more sturdier, such as when making a mould, you would use a smaller amount of C, or you wouldn't even use any at all and just leave it being A and B. But when making a squashy appliance, the amount of softener you use can be quite high. In fact, when I was pretty much doing the first course which introduced me to silicone, this seemed to be the general equation of mixing percentages. As you can see, with A and B both being 50, together that makes 100%, and this is your base which you are adding your softener to. This leads us to the softener, which would be 180% you would add in addition to the 100% of A and B, which will leave you with a squishy flesh creation. I don't know if I was explaining my point very well with the percentages, so I'm just going to quickly throw up an equation to help explain. So over here we have the A and the B, which is the 50 and the 50 making 100%. 50% in this case is 10 grams. So 50 plus 50, 10 grams plus 10 grams gives us 100% of 20 grams. We then use that 100% to work out the 180%. So 180% of 20 is 36 grams. I did in fact have to write that down to figure it out because I am not good at mental maths. So the 20 grams, or the 100% of the A and the B combined, mixed with 36 grams or 180% of the softener, would give you a finished product which is very, very soft when it cures. I also just want to quickly throw out that this equation isn't the do or die of how much softener you need to have. The only 2 that need to always be the same is A and B. They always need to be in equal parts, otherwise it just won't set. With the softener you can change it around a bit, but for a good starting point when you're just first learning and you're mixing silicone and you're worried if it's not setting or curing, doing the 50 and 50% making 100, you can always make the softener 100%. That would be 20 grams of silicone and then 20 grams of softener combined together to get your finished fleshy product. Also throwing up, there is a product you can use which will bring your silicone from this gooey and slimy and sticking to my fingers, to a consistency which is a little bit more like this, a thick smearing paste. This consistency is similar to the one that you get with Sculpt Gel, where as you can see here, it is a thick gel-like consistency. This product is called a Thixotropic or Thixotropic something, or the one I have is called Thix, which it's in here. It started leaking and I didn't know how, so I kept it caged. But basically, if you add a small amount of this to this slimy one, you end up with a paste. But why on earth would you want a paste? With a paste-like consistency such as this, you can then apply this directly onto the skin, blend out edges and make an effect that way, rather than pouring your silicone into a mould and making a prosthetic appliance. With the paste as well, I should just throw up, you do still need to mix equal parts of A and B. You can't just have one, and you can't have one more than the other. This does then throw up the question of why would you make that paste with that Thixotropic, thick boy? Why would you mix that thick thing with your silicone to make a paste when you could just as easily get Sculpt Gel, which is already like that? Wow. It mostly then comes down to cost. When you get Sculpt Gel, you will always get 3. You should always get 3, I should add. If they don't, bad, because you need all 3. I think I got these 3 all together for around 40 to 50 pounds, whereas with these big old ones, I think I got each of these for around 25 to 30 per thing. With Sculpt Gel, it should always come as a kit with all 3 parts. If you're buying the bottles, you need to make sure you get your A, your B, and your softener, which I can't hold because I'm not an octopus. And I think the Deadener was a little bit more expensive, around probably 30 to 35 pounds. So altogether this would end up being more expensive. I realise in this clip I basically am talking rubbish, but basically the point I'm trying to make is even though the smaller one is cheaper, you do get more for your buck with the bigger one, and that's basically it. Okay, I'm very sorry. I can't remember how much the thickening agent was. I think it might have been around 10 to 20 pounds. I can't remember, it was a few years ago I got it. So if this is something you know you'll be using a lot of and you know you'll probably need it in your kit, I would then recommend getting the bigger bottles. I got these 2.5 years ago and I have used that much. When you're making prosthetic appliances, you don't need as much as you think you do, so these do last a really long time. So if you know you're going to benefit, I would recommend then getting a bigger bottle over the Sculpt Gel, because this will last you and you can then use it for making appliances, you can use it for making moulds, and you can use it for making that thick paste which you then apply directly onto your skin. So leads us to the last thing I'm going to talk about, colouring. How do you colour silicone? Many people ask. No one asked. I asked. As we bring back to my sticky glove covered concoction, you can see it is a pale flesh tone, but I don't know if you can see it, but inside there are also many little flecks of different colour. These little flecks is something known as flocking. Flocking is essentially this. Although it may look like powder, it is actually those little fibres which you add to your silicone to make it look a little bit more lifelike. It brings a lot more undertones and gives it a little bit more depth and warmth. Different skin tones have many different shades in them anyway, so this just really helps bring out that colour. How much of each flocking is really up to you. If you're still pretty new to special effects and colouring, I'd recommend that if you do try out the flocking, you add small amounts first and then build up. So maybe add a little bit of yellow, check it against your skin tone, add a bit of red, check it against your skin tone, add a bit of blue, check it against your skin tone, and then gradually build up the colour rather than chucking a whole lot in to begin with. But of course you cannot just get a base colour of just flocking alone. I present Silicone Pigments. So when I started off, I did a bit of an error. I got this one, and as you can see, has made a mess. This one is pale flesh because I'm in fact pale. Don't know if you could tell. Whereas I had actually been told on multiple occasions to get medium pigment. I had to read it because I forgot what it was because I am stupid. Basically the difference is if you are a pale person like moi, if you get the pale pigment, it usually has quite orangey undertones. As you can probably see the difference. This one doesn't have such an orangey undertone, so if you are pale, you just use a less amount of it. The silicone's already quite translucent, we're just adding little bits here and there to help it melt into skin. But of course, there are not just pale people such as myself out in the world making special effects. And so, what do you do if you're trying to make a darker skin tone? Also, if you personally do not have a whole stocked up silicone pigment, you can in cases use acrylic paint as well. Acrylic paint just sometimes has white added to a lot of its colours, so just be careful with them basically. I'll admit it's been again around 2.5 years since I was mixing darker skin tone pigments. It turns out everyone on the most recent course I did, which was a year long, was pasty as crap. crap's not pasty. Again, just throwing out the advice I was given for when you're mixing for a darker skin tone. So you have your silicone, add these bad boys in before you add a more definitive flesh pigment. This is because if you just chuck in a lot of like darker brown colours, you may end up with a really muddy, unrealistic, unlifelike colour. If you start off with the flocking first, where you give it all that warmth and different nuances and a little bit more life into it, and then you slowly add in your darker pigment colour, it then means you can ensure you get that warmth and the undertones in the prosthetic piece for your darker skin tone. Also, just a little bit of something I remembered before leaving on my merry way and editing this. I also just wanted to quickly throw up. You can make silicone to make a mould, and then you can mix silicone to pour in a mould. You have to make sure you have another product. You can't pour silicone straight into silicone. It will stick and it will pretty much not come out. Silicone sticks to silicone, and by does it stick, it will hold on for dear goddamn life. I'll do another video probably explaining in more detail and showing in a bit more of a practical sense, but I just wanted to throw this out there in case people got all this and wanted then to start making pieces. If you have a mould, you'll need 3 more products before you can put the silicone into it. You'll need a releasing agent. You can get special official sprays, but I just use Vaseline, so. You'll also need cap plastic and acetone, which when combined together and then painted or sprayed onto this will then create a barrier. Then you put in your silicone and you peel it off. Silicone cures very shiny as well, so that cap plastic and acetone just helps make it a little bit more skin-like and matte in texture. As we move in with a few examples here, you can see this thin papery outline. That is the cap plastic I'm talking about. You will need those before you start making moulds. But of course, this was just an introduction and a little explanation into the magical world of silicone, which tends to not be highlighted as much on special effects social media, and I generally had pretty much no idea about. So I just put this together to maybe help anyone who's starting to break into the industry, or anyone who wants to become a special effects makeup artist full time.
I also want to become a special effects makeup artist full time.
But that being said, that is us truly done and dusted for today. I hope you learned something. I hope I made sense. I hope you feel more confident in silicone and special effects and knowledge and everything. If you are interested in different special effects content and learning a little bit more about special effects in general, I do recommend then hitting subscribe. I'm trying to create content and upload more regularly. That being said, I hope you had a very good day and I'll see you soon. Take care.